Good morning. At the outset, I'd like to thank Doug and the AVPN team for this opportunity to be right out here with a large and talented group of people who all share a common purpose, which is doing social good in a meaningful way. It's a real privilege. Thank you, Doug. As I'm the first speaker of the day, the AVPN team wanted me to stress that one of the objectives of this conference, as Doug put it, is to push and shape each other's thinking. And I think we can only do that by being open with our own experiences and thoughts, both what has worked and, importantly, what has not worked, and including thoughts that are well-formed and equally not well-formed. So in keeping with that objective, I'm going to try to take you through my own philanthropic journey, and with particular emphasis on how my wife and I try to bring a private equity-like approach to what we do in terms of both scale and impact. I shall therefore try to take you over 4 or 5 phases of this journey. The first one, which I think I'll move really quickly through because all of you are converts, is why we should give or be philanthropic. The second is really how much to give. The third is how to give. And finally, what have been some of my big learnings in the last 15 years that we've been trying to do this. As we go along, I think you'll discover I'm not as inspirational or eloquent speaker as Doug was. So I'll try to really limit my monologue to about 10 minutes, 5 minutes under the allotted time, and really leave 5 minutes for a more interactive discussion between all of us. So the first thing I wanted to really take you over is my own journey on why to give. And I think, like almost everyone I know, you always start with baby steps. Often those are steps seated at home. The values that your parents imbibe in you, what you see of your neighbors and good friends, and you start doing things in a small way. I came from a humble background. We didn't have money to give, so we were encouraged to give time. And I think we always found that very, very inspirational. Particularly in a country like India, there's always a lot to do, and I think we were able to do a little. But really, for me, the big opportunity came when I was able to go to the US for my education. And what struck me there was that in a country where the need for philanthropy was actually a lot less than my own country, the desire to give, whether amongst people who had a lot or who had a little, was incredible. There was an amazing sense of society amongst people, amongst community. Whether you were kids, you were part of some scout movement and did something for the local community. If you're a family, you often went and cooked in a community kitchen over a weekend. And of course, there were the great examples of amazing philanthropists who had done a lot, in some cases giving away pretty much all of their life savings. And it really got me thinking about, why is it that in an environment where the need for all of this is a lot less, is there so much more of philanthropy relative to what we see back home? And so when I came back to India, went back to India in the early 90s, I decided to start focusing a little bit of my efforts, along with building my career at the initial stages, on figuring out what more we could do with the social sector. Fortunately for me, I was at the right place at the right time. If you went to India in the early 90s, it was a rising tide, and it lifted a lot of underwater boats, including people like me. I was quite fortunate to be able to experience both wealth and power at relatively early stage in my life. I decided that I would step up and move from what I call the 1% phase before I went to the US, which is giving away a little bit of my income, to what I then called the 10% phase, pretty much shaped by the thoughts that are seeded in you by most religions, where you should try to give away 10%, tithe it, as they put it. And so I found ways to find interesting causes, just to get introduced to interesting people, so I could give away about 10% of my wealth on an ongoing basis. And I found that incredibly satisfying and rewarding. It exposed me to a lot of interesting people, many who were much more interesting in the world of investment banking, which is the world I was building my career in. And I actually made some of my best friends that I hang out with now from the social sector in that phase. However, that phase in India was also accompanied by incredible, extraordinary wealth creation. And as you heard from both the previous two speakers, it was quite incredible that wealth creation virtually had very little trickle-down effect. Sure, there were statistics being thrown about that hundreds of millions of people were getting lifted off the poverty line, but truly the gap between the haves and have-nots was increasing at a very, very rapid pace. In fact, the concentration of wealth that we saw in that decade was, I would say, simply extraordinary. I would say pretty much 90% of the wealth that was getting created amongst maybe a few hundred people, and the rest of it divided amongst a billion people. And I think that was already beginning to, in minds of a lot of us, it was getting really disconcerting. In my own mind, by then I had started running the country's largest investment bank, DSP Merrill Lynch, at that point of time. I was exposed right at the forefront of this wealth creation, but it really brought a deep sense of dissatisfaction. I started asking myself questions which a lot of people said was my midlife crisis coming 5 years too early, which is, what is the purpose of all of this? I mean, what's the purpose of life? So I did the unusual thing, at that point of time. I went to my boss, who was the chairman of the firm, and I told him I wanted to take a sabbatical because I just couldn't make sense of what was going on. And, after trying to convince me not to do that, he realized that it probably made sense for me to do it. And so I took some time off from running the firm and asking myself all these questions. My wife is a practicing Buddhist, and so she pushed me to something called Vipassana, and some of my friends also pushed me to do that, which they said would be the most difficult thing for me to do because those who know me know I can't stop talking. So, and that's, you sit in a secluded room for 11 days and you basically meditate. And, so I landed up, the first day of my sabbatical, I landed up in a place called Igatpuri, not very far from Bombay, and tried to, meditate. The first day, at the end of the first day, I remember the instructor telling me, I've seen different kinds of minds, but yours is what I classify as the monkey mind. So I said, what does that mean? He says, if you see a monkey, he'll go from branch to branch and keep going. He'll never settle down. And that's, how restless your mind is. And the long and short of it is I spent 11 days there. I didn't learn any meditation. But I sat and actually just forced myself to think about what is the purpose of at least my life and the purpose of all this wealth creation that I was seeing around me. I thought it was quite a rewarding, because I actually used that period to put together a lot of what I'd read, in American history, in Indian history, particularly business history, and really figured out that the only thing enduring that we could do in the world of business, the only thing that would have legacy, is actually the impact that we would make on society. I realized that virtually every leader I could think about, business leader, who had lived more than 50 years old, was someone who'd actually created some sort of valuable social enterprise today. I couldn't recollect pretty much any business leader, including in my country, who had lived for a period longer than that and hadn't done something meaningful with his or her life. And I thought that was really interesting because I grew up being a big admirer of the Tata Group, but I never thought of the Tata Group that way. And here was, it was a great example that had been around me all the time of an incredible cutting-edge conglomerate where the entire ownership was vested in a charitable trust for the sake of society. And yet it went out there and competed fiercely and was a leader in virtually every business that it was in. And I was really remarkably struck by that. And so, so that those 11 days actually gave me some degree of clarity that while I enjoyed doing what I was doing in the world of financial services, that the scratching the surface in social enterprise was actually a big waste of time. And that the real opportunity was to really combine both skills that I was learning in the professional world and deploy those in the social world, and importantly, use capital that I was generating at that point of time in my job to be able to build institutions and organizations. And so basically, that's what I landed up doing. Now, all that meant stepping up both the time and monetary commitment that my wife and I had to social enterprise, and we decided to do that. But this is when we moved to the second phase of our journey, which is figuring out how much to give. And it's very interesting because, while we were clear that we wanted to give more than what we were giving, we had never really defined it. And that's odd because, when you step back and think of everything else we do for ourselves, we set targets. We have objectives. We're very clear what problem we are solving. We're very clear what wealth we want to have because we want to drive X car and buy Y house and et cetera. But, I figured that it's really odd. We always treat social enterprise as something which is incremental to what we do as opposed to the core of what we do. Fortunately for me, I had the opportunity at that point of time to be presented a book by a good friend of mine who used to, at that time, run General Atlantic Partners in India and Singapore, Abhay Havaldar. It was the life story of a person called Chuck Feeney. And I don't know how many of you have heard of Chuck, but if you haven't, you must get his book, The Billionaire Who Wasn't, which is his life story. And it's this incredible journey of a amazing man who created extraordinary amount of wealth, and then one fine day walked into his lawyer's office and willed it all the way to the Atlantic Philanthropies. We didn't hear about him for many, many years because he was absolutely incredibly private. And one of the big conditions he would set for any of his grants would be that if anyone ever divulged where they got the money from, he would yank it. And so no one heard about him. For decades, no one heard about him. The Atlantic Philanthropies and Chuck Feeney individually were responsible for solving incredible amount of problems around the world in education, including in Asia, in Vietnam, for example. And I think he was probably transformational in getting the two sides in the Irish settlement together to resolve a pretty big issue that Europe faced. And he gave away about $8 billion equivalent of his wealth in one swoop, with the single condition that it all be distributed during his lifetime, and that the Atlantic Philanthropies should be wound up in a finite period of time, and hopefully before he passes away. This year, actually, they will wind up. And I read that story, and it was an amazing journey. My wife and I talked a lot about that book. And then we asked ourselves, we always read these things, we see a movie, get excited, and then the question is, what do you really do of it? So we decided we're going to do something meaningful from it. And we decided to structure our entire wealth in such a way that we divided it up, and we said we'll keep what's enough for our family, and everything else from there on will go towards philanthropy. And that's been our journey for the last 5 years. We try to now give away 90% of our wealth. We hit that target last year of our ongoing income every year. This year, we hope to give away more than that. But I think it's been an incredibly fun journey. People say that we give a lot, and we are very clear, both of us, that we are actually being selfish, and that what we really get is an amazing amount of satisfaction that what we're able to do with that is a lot more than the typical incremental use of wealth in any sort of material context. Some of the key learnings that we have had along the way, we've really tried to use a private equity-like approach. That's the world I come from. I became an investor 7 years ago. And so we have very structured screens for selecting NGOs, for working with them in terms of ongoing performance evaluation. We set metrics. We do monthly reviews. We do detailed quarterly reviews, more detailed annual reviews, site meetings, all the kind of stuff that you would see private equity investors do with their portfolio companies. And then we've moved on now to a new phase where we've decided that we will largely try to fund things that no other investor wants to fund. We keep hearing from all the organizations, all donors ask the organizations that we fund, what's your administrative overhead? Nobody likes to give money for administration. We realize that's not how how businesses are built. Businesses are built with that. So we decided that we will completely reorient our portfolio, and from last year onwards, we decided that we'll only fund administrative overhead, capacity building. So if people, for the organizations that we have selected, if people want to hire folks who can go out and do marketing campaigns, fundraising, hire consultants to come in and do problem solving, do social media campaigns, and importantly, training. We've tried to institute now programs where we send 5 to 10 business social leaders every year to Harvard to work with 100 other social leaders and really understand what's best in class, have the kind of sharing that I think will happen at this conference. So I think now our focus is essentially moving to capacity building, because one of our big learnings has been that that's what's incredibly important. It is, at the end of the day, all about people. The second big learning we've had is that it's all about collaboration. Pretty much everything that we do it with like-minded friends. They're people who we can bounce things off each other. It also gives us collective power that we would not be able to do by our own. So virtually every project that we have done with a group of people. We are funding a school with Vidya's foundation in Patna, which works with the most ostracized community in India. It's a group of 6 people who are building that school. We are building a university out of Delhi with people, largely, a lot of them from the private equity community. But we've realized that there's just incredible power in coming together and pushing the envelope. And so 2 of our big learnings have been, collaboration is incredibly important, and it's all about people and investing in organizations. And that's what we are now, that's the latest phase of our journey. But let me try to wrap this up by saying that, often people will come up to us and say that we really like what you're doing and it's great and it's selfless. I'm very clear, I have no illusion in my mind. We are extremely selfish, both my wife and I. This is about, at the end of the day, having a sense of accomplishment with the time we have on earth and the money that we are blessed with. And I'm not so sure who the beneficiaries of all our philanthropy is, whether it's actually the recipients or us as givers. And it's been an incredibly fun journey, but we think we've just started and we are still, as Doug put it, scratching the envelope. Thank you so much.